So John Jones and Daniel Cormier are facing off once again, this time as coaches on the Russian web reality show called ALF Reality. Now, I'm going to get into some of the things being said between these two rivals and what I think is going to happen here in this new chapter of Jones versus DC. But before I do that, please, if you're new to the channel, please drop a sub. Help us grow this year. I'd really appreciate it. And if you just did, thank you very much. So let's get into it. Now, if you aren't familiar with this show, it's just like an Ultimate Fighter inspired series where you have two former fighter coaches basically just fucking around. This is basically like a paid vacation from at least what I can tell, because this show, it's in Russian, but John Jones and DC, they are here and they seem friendly, but obviously they still got some gripes with each other. And that is to be expected though. But I'm surprised that they even made this happen. I didn't think you'd be able to pay DC enough money to do something like this with John. Because as you all know, once upon a time, they just couldn't coexist. Like you couldn't get DC in the same room with John. But things are a lot more tame these days. You know, it's not an automatic fight just waiting to go off. No, their beef, it isn't as active and everlasting as like a Conor and Khabib. Even though the rivalry did get pretty nasty, these days they're much more controlled. But don't get it twisted. These guys, deep down inside, they never forgot. And you know, DC has always been the one to be honest with everyone, like, no, I can't fuck with this guy. And John has always been the optimist, like, I would love to be friends with DC. I would love to repair this relationship, if you can even call it that, but it's just two different sides. Like, DC's side is, bro, I never had any issues, or better yet, misconduct in this whole thing. And John's side is like, yeah, I'll put it to rest, but it's easy to say that when you won the two fights and you had the PEDs. And I mean, DC could have been in that real GOAT conversation if he had beaten John. So I've always understood where both fighters are coming from with their stances on each other, but ultimately it's just way too complicated to repair. And I think clearly the biggest issue is all the inconsistencies from John. One moment he's talking about how he would love to be friends with DC, and DC's still like, nah, I'm good. And then John just goes right back to talking shit. Kind of like he's low-key upset that this is harder to repair than what he was thinking. So I think that's why it's been so hard for DC to view John Jones as anything other than a fake person. Like that'll just always be his perception of him. And John has kind of proven him right because he's already turning heel, but he's kind of holding back in this quick interview with Red Corner MMA where he was asked some questions, but we'll just focus on the ones about him and DC. And like I said, he said some things, but you can tell he was kind of holding back from emphasizing how he really feels. So let's take a listen.
Cormier, oh man, what a stuffy, just dickhead Cormier really is. I think if you really get to know Daniel Cormier, he's really not.
Yeah, it was nice.
He's an asshole. He was an asshole. I mean, he didn't really connect with any of the fighters here. He's just an asshole. I tried to make peace with him many times, and he made it very clear that he wants to be enemies for the rest of his life because how lucrative it is. And he's just a, I don't know.
But you guys having fun here?
There was moments where we got to laugh, you know, but for the most part, he's a dickhead. You know, you look at the way that he treats his staff members. He brought like 10 yes men out with him and literally, go get me my water. Where's my this? Why is that this? It was just, he just bosses guys around. You know, and the times we weren't filming, he wasn't very sociable with the people on set. He's just a dickhead. I think people that really work with him knows that.
Okay, well, that's a different energy from before they linked up, where he sounded hopeful that maybe they can repair their relationship, but now he sounds like he realized he was too hopeful. Like he found out again that DC and him are never going to be friends, so...
The last one, what do you feel, sir? wrestle against DC in the ALF Reality?
If I wrestled against Daniel Cormier, it'd be really interesting to see what happened. I can't definitively say what would happen in the sport of wrestling, but the one thing I do know is that I made him cry in front of the world. I took him off of the list of being considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. He'll be even lower in the rankings of the greatest heavyweight of all time because my prospect, Gable Steveson, is going to be 3 times the champion Daniel Cormier ever was.
John just lets go at the end there. And I think through this entire interview, you can tell John just wants to be perceived as the good guy. He doesn't want to be the bad guy anymore. You know, at first he doesn't want to go off on DC too much, but just says fuck it at the end there. And this kind of aligns with just, you know, throughout the years with every John Jones DC moment where John is talking about him in DC and he's trying to be the one making an effort to repair things, but it never really feels like he puts his ego aside. You know, for a relationship so damaged, I would think you have to approach it like, bro, I was wrong. Like, just pause your ego for a second and admit you were the one who made this situation as difficult as it is. I don't think I've ever seen John do that, where he comes out and says, I get why DC dislikes me. It's because I cheated him. I was the worst version of myself. No, he pretty much just says, it's because I beat him twice. And it's like, no, bro, it runs way deeper than that. So if he can do that, open up to DC and say, as a man, I'll admit it, I was wrong. Maybe DC can open up and make some changes of heart there, but I don't know. Maybe they have had that moment off cam and DC is like, nah, bro, this is for life. So I think enough time hasn't passed. DC talks about how he's older and he's done fighting. So the relationship is better than what it used to be, but he doesn't want to fold on the fact that, you know, oh, I never did anything wrong, so we can't be friends. But I think the older DC gets, the more he will come around and say, you know what, whatever, man. The past is the past. I'll let it go now. And they don't got to be best friends, but, you know, maybe one day we can get maybe like a podcast where they sit down and talk about it from an aged perspective. You know, I think that would be pretty dope. Now, what do I think will happen here out of this reality show? Well, this show, I think it's only a month long, real time per season. So that's plenty of time for things to boil over and maybe we get some confrontational moments with these two. I couldn't see them go all the way though and, you know, just throw hands or anything like that, but who knows? I think we'll be getting lots more content out of this, plenty of clips in the coming month or whenever this season will premiere. I'm sure we'll get lots to talk about. Now, one last thing here. John Jones versus DC in wrestling. DC, please don't do it. I don't want to see DC compete with John in any combat sport. Wrestling, boxing, nothing. I don't want to see DC take another L. Not to say he would lose in wrestling. That definitely would be interesting to, you know, see what happens there. But DC is out here tripling down on his wrestling, saying he would sweep John and he trains wrestling every day. Look, I'm sure DC would play very well against John, but if he were to lose that, I think he would be so heartbroken. You know, I don't think it's worth it. You seemingly have nothing to lose, but trust me, he's going to lose some sleep if that happens. So, yeah. DC and John Jones, they link up for the ALF reality. Let's see where this goes from here. And if you made it this far, please drop a like, sub to the channel. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. And bye.